Well, it looks like we are live, back for another Proof of Beauty podcast, episode number 10. This week we're just going to shoot the shit, happy hour vibes. We're just going to hang out and chat, get some updates from the week, see how everybody's doing. I really appreciate everybody who's taking the time to tune in with us this Friday. Yeah, guys, I guess we're just going to hang out.
Yeah, so price is up for some reason. Who knows? Is there a reason?
Price is up.
I feel like you just say price is up, and I think it's already assumed that it's usually hard to know exactly why it's up, but
right.
There usually is enough. You can metaphorically put some water on your fingers and know where the winds is blowing, but that's about as far as I think.
It would make sense to some degree. Like if interest rates are being hiked and they're being hiked, typically people save more money. And it would make sense that some of these people would rather save their money in crypto than keep their dollars in a traditional banking establishment. So it is cool to see crypto pumping a little bit. But I also wonder in these times where, the pump is so predictable, if there's like a lot of like pump and dump action going on. Like, I don't know if you guys are seeing that, but
right now, it's pretty much going to be, is this a bear trap until it's the bull market?
Yeah, basically.
It's pretty much going to be that for now.
Right.
Like, it's like everybody's like, bull trap, and then it's like you get 2 years of like 2 financial quarters worth of like bullish energy. Everybody forgets about the bear market again, right?
Right.
But it is probably too quick for it to reverse on a full bull cycle. So
absolutely.
I expect.
But also, I just don't think there's enough substance as a space to sustain an actual reasonably useful bull market.
What was Vitalik calling the whole 6-part plan?
Whatever the merge, the spur, whatever, right? The splurge was one of the not the splurge. There's a gazillion versions of whatever the word urge.
I don't know why they did that, but hilarious.
Actually, it won't take long for it to be rebranded. I mean, the merge has been colloquially rebranded in so many ways.
I am seeing that standard Twitter traffic about hyping up the merge and proof of stake and all that stuff. So classic Twitter feed. So nothing's really changed.
So Vitalik, get ready for the surge, verge, purge, and splurge.
I feel like it's like when it's a bull market, when people are just trying to understand why the prices went up so high versus I predicted it because POS came through and we're price actioning it in the thing where I feel like, especially during the NFT booms and the DeFi, you're like, holy shit, there's actually usefulness on this blockchain. Right. There's a demand for the gas price. And then we start seeing smart people make smart threads about pretty much using the hindsight 2020 strategy to get followers, right? But I feel like a proper bull market has to catch us by surprise, a little bit, in the sense that I'm certain there's a lot of people. There is a few body of people who pretty much I saw this coming, probably maybe down to the month, right? But I could say that I'm fairly bullish. A new bull market will happen. I just don't know when, right? But I'm pretty anti truth sayers in this space. We've talked about the halvening so many times. We're talking about POS. That there's going to be pricing in action like that, but there's if you're saying you want a bull market almost out of emotional cope for your portfolio, then
pricing, the concept of pricing in stuff doesn't make sense too, right? It's like that I guess if more people learn about it, more people buy into it, potentially, but all the big players already took positions, right? Whenever the crash actually happens. So.
Right. Yeah. People were talking about a potential recession in 2022 summer, fall time since 2021.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So people who play the long game and play the macro, they make moves accordingly. Right. And then the rest of us are sitting here trying to go, why did that happen?
Wall Street bets, why did my option, my 500x option, get closed?
A 500x option.
It's you got to know what Robinhood is selling, right? Robinhood, and is selling to these companies, right? Citadel or whatever. They're selling order flow, right?
Right.
Your order flow is extremely exploitable. So in some principles you see that in DeFi, but the speed of block time instead of what AWS time.
Yeah.
That Robinhood is on. So.
Do you guys use Robinhood?
No, I don't trade stocks at all, or own any stocks. Now that I think about it,
dude, that's like one of the weird things.
No.
That's like one of the things people ask me. So I was like, "So what stocks do you own?" And I was like, or like, "Do you know like Apple went to an all-time high?" And I'm like, "Why would I? I
couldn't
don't
tell
know."
you, dog. Yeah,
I
I've
like
been following that shit since forever. Yeah.
It was just like the S&P is like up this much. I was like, I have no relative scale. Is that good or bad? Because like for us,
it's boomer market.
Crypto could go up 3,000%. That could be bad, right? Like, so it's like I like the whole securities markets for me at least, out of not having enough brain power in a given day to give enough attention, and also too, it's like I do personally have a belief that the securities market, when it comes to just principled, pragmatic like token design, like fungible asset design, it's pretty much, in my eyes, like it's like a policed into value more than it was designed for value. Where like if you didn't have a lot of these regulatory bodies stopping a lot of these more egregious manipulations, and there still is a lot of manipulations that can occur. Like at least in big ass quotes here, in crypto, the rules are a little bit more baked, but then cough Luna.
Actually, we have a worthwhile topic to discuss. Like SEC put out, and the Justice Department, right, put out their first case against insider trading for crypto for two Coinbase for one Coinbase employee, dude. It's so
Coinbase PM one.
Yeah.
If I recall correctly, wasn't it for like a very small amount too? Like,
yeah, dude. It's like these guys made $1 million, meaning they're not even that good. Like they made $1 million.
They're not even that good.
Well, I'm just saying, it's like they could have took much larger positions. It's not like they were doing anything egregious, you know. It's like, he like my friend calls me.
This would qualify as like a small white collar crime, right? Like more than it's like this is like a systemic. Like crime that was like a masterminded thing, right? Like this gets you into whichever penitentiary, whichever prison in the States is only for white collar crimes, right? Like it's still pretty bad, but like and pretty dumb, but like
yeah.
This actually brings up like a interesting like ethical conversation. Like if you're a part of a big organization and you happen to catch wind that something is going to happen, and you might not have all the information. Let's say you don't have all the information, but you act on that little bit of information you have. Is that still white collar crime, or is it speculation?
I don't even really believe in insider trading, but I have like extreme viewpoint on it personally.
I mean, I think at a societal level, not to prescribe it at an ethical level, at a regulatory, I look at regulatory bodies as like they're meant to stop consumer failures, pretty much like consumers being damaged by any powerful positioned people within the rails that they were given by the higher governmental powers, right? So like I keep on seeing this again and again, especially in crypto where it's a little less regulated. I feel like every single time there's something happening that like will have a price act, like a price movement, like the coins are moving already behind the scenes for like a while, right? Like there's already been trading. Like, what do you qualify? It's like
the concept of protecting consumers, though, is like by itself to me is unsound, especially during modern time. It's like, I mean, like they can't pretend like OTC stocks don't exist, right? Like people can buy that, anybody can buy that, right?
Yeah.
So what are you really protecting against, right?
Yeah, it's like they're gonna have to fight a losing battle. They always are, right? Like it's not like as much as the SEC is a powerful entity, it's not that well funded, right? Comparatively speaking, right, to other government agencies like the defense. So it's always a losing battle. I think if the SEC does their job correctly, I feel like it has to take away all the most egregious manipulations. But as a protective agency, do I think it's protecting? That could get very, very contentious what that means, and I've leaned on the side that in a better financial system you shouldn't need these protections, in the part that the asset itself protects itself from from its very own issuers, right? Like that's why I'm in crypto, right? Versus
right
at Robinhood, screwing around with YOLO SPAC stocks, right? Like
right.
It comes down to like a fundamental belief, right? So you can solve most of our, if not all our problems with technology versus paper. So
what are you guys' thoughts on crypto derivative stocks or like synthetic stocks, for example, where you could get like there's a program out, I don't know if it's still out, but it's called Deuce, and they created basically a decentralized Robinhood where you can get pretty much any stock, one for one value, but it was a synthetic peg of it.
I wouldn't trust that shit at all.
in early DeFi, that was like the vision almost. It was like you synthesize. So like when it was called open finance, right? It was like you take like the S&P and the Dow, like the Dow Jones, right? Whatever. You take those, you synthesize them into a ERC20. And usually because of brokerages and everything, you can only buy in certain buy sizes. Like you can't just buy like $10 of it unless there's like a very consumer friendly brokerage. Usually which is only offered to a certain citizen. So like the pitch was pretty much, hey, let's synthesize the Dow Jones and give it to third world countries and let them be able to pretty much buy with their change into securities that would give them uplift, right? I never quite thought that was the winning story in the sense that like
it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, especially if you look at a.
I saw it as like you're doing 40 steps to make an investable asset for third world countries. I was just like, well, in 3 years, the crypto will become the investable asset. So why bother do the 30 40 step process, right? Because like in some ways, maybe I'm so construed in this, is like I do genuinely believe, sans the volatility and the manipulability of some of these assets, you park your change in like some of these top actually useful assets, or like even parking stables into Compound and earning like American level savings rates on the US dollar, not even on your local currency, is like a pretty good value proposition. Like without having going through the crap process of like how do you peg and create a game.
That's right? Like it's also like a roundabout solution to like just a trend that we would want to see is businesses putting pressure on issuing their equity on a chain, right? I mean, that's ultimately the long-term solution to these things. I mean, marketplace like start the NASDAQ and all that shit, Chicago, SIBO, right? That's all owned by ICE in Atlanta. Those fuckers just run fiber all around the country. That's all they do. They don't do anything else. They have no interest in doing anything on chain, right? So, because they control that, all those rails. They even control the Indian stock exchange, the Delhi stock exchange. So, I already own that.
And so I still do subscribe to the thought that like if you want things that has, hope the SEC doesn't catch me for saying this, but security like assets, they should be Web3 native security like assets. As in like I feel like that was kind of like saying like I think Ethereum is a lot more where it is today because it created its own economy versus stealing another economy over, right? Like NFTs, DeFi. You can make an argument for some of these governance tokens that gives you the promise of income. Like they have enough security-esque behaviors that like unless you really need the blockchain as your settlement network of choice to access American securities because you're so limited, you're also dealing with the value proposition of a very risky, untested network too. Is probably gonna have to pay a boatloads of gas fees. Like it's just not a good UX, comparatively speaking, to probably accessing securities through a more traditional brokerage. It's like
you also
I don't think it's
like
that,
right. You miss out on like the dividend structure, right? Like so, if you're gonna buy synthetic stock, you get no dividend. There's probably a whole bunch of other things you miss out on now that I think about it, like benefits that you would have perhaps if you own the original security versus a synthetic peg.
And I'd imagine like I don't know about every region, but I feel like how it interacts with the retirement base, like tax saving opportunities if you do own these securities and interesting account positions, like if I had just like floating dollars laying around to blow, like as a first world country, if I wanted to buy securities, which I won't, I'll download Robinhood, right? Like, it's just not a good enough value proposition, I think, on chain, and the amount of engineering work to get to there is just, not worth it.
Yeah,
right.
That's interesting.
Which
I
is
hadn't
like,
really. Yeah, go ahead.
I think like goes on to like the whole theory in my eyes. It's like I feel like I can say the same things, replace a few words, but for like the Unreal Engine NFT games, like movement, right? Like it's like you're doing a lot of work to get to something that still is kind of in my eyes an inferior product to a Steam-based marketplace discoverability engine game, like thing, right? And so
yeah.
I
Do
don't
you
know.
guys know? Do you guys know JP Games?
Japan
JP
games.
Yeah,
That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah, I believe. I mean, I'm looking here because something you said just brought to me. They're actually. I saw something recently about them building a world kit using the Unreal Engine for metaverse world building. A little bit off topic, but interesting.
I feel like we've heard that pitch quite a few times from different
Yeah,
entities, right? Like, I
yeah.
mean, like to be fair, like the Unreal Engine world, was like they have like the Unreal Marketplace. Unreal 4 is pretty freaking powerful. Like
I
I've
mean, there would
seen
be
certainly.
a big difference between existing players coming into the space with extreme, experience around game engines, and then, maybe figuring out some good idea around NFTs. But us, like normal people in the space, like trying to build it from the ground up, seems like a not destined for failure.
Right, and to this
Right.
point, it's just like why lose the control over your settlement network? Right, you control scarcity, you control the settlement, you control who gets in and out. Like NFTs is you're giving up power unless you really want more capital inflow outflow. But then if you're like an engine developer like Unreal, say you're selling 1,000 3D models of a character, why limit it to 1,000? When if there's 30,000 followers, you want 30,000 developers. You want to give every 30,000 one of them that 3D model that they'll pay $2 for to get access to make a game on your platform, right? Like it's like why create a scarcity metric there when your whole business model is on distribution, pretty much, right? Like, and so
Yeah,
in
if
that case,
anything,
that's where the more
it just needs to be UI, right? I mean, that's the only advantage of a game is like a novel web experiences. Other than that, it just makes things more complicated, especially around the token.
Yeah, so I guess that goes into a nice place in the conversation that's really of the mind share of today's, like what we're thinking about internally, right? It's like I don't think we have a word yet for it, and I've heard people give it labels, but there is a new genre of entertainment slash interactivity of it as an experience that I think that NFTs will pretty much develop into or become. And it's not. I don't think you call them games because they don't follow traditional game developmental experiences, right? And they don't quite follow, I think, like a movie or whatever. But it sits in the between. It's like a new defining category. And I think in this void, that's where all the value is, right? Like you would like Azuki is an interactive experience, right? If you were to go to New York and went to the garden event, it apparently was a very big event and it's an experience. And like Stapleverse has, right, like things to do in real world that's kind of plays on Pokemon Go. It's like they have game like features, but they're not a game, right? Like it's I don't know what we call them yet, but there is a I don't think calling them game does it justice anymore because it's like I've sometimes prescribed it as like a lo-fi game where you're like using minimal mechanics to express a lot of things and let it's like
Yeah,
creating
I
a
mean,
pseudo. I don't know what you want to call it. Like,
yeah, I mean, if you try to define it, like what a game is, right? It's like it's an application for, I guess you could say, what a goal that's non-practical, basically. right? It's like some kind of like experience where you're trying to go through it with
Well,
a
what do you
goal.
mean by
The
practical?
goal
If I
is,
were to play a game well enough and become a professional esporter,
okay, I guess
esport player, is that practical?
right.
yeah, not like like I guess arbitrary goal. Like it's not like
Yeah.
yeah.
So what you're really talking about is just gamified experiences, not really having an identity for those.
Yeah, and not just gamified, but like the NFT gamified way. Like there's
Mm.
a problem space of interactivity that I feel fairly strongly in saying that NFTs is actually just the best medium to enable such interactivity.
Yeah.
And I think the Stableverse has kind of alluded a little bit of that, where there is such a strong like uh like effectively community like movement just in part of the of like how they, as far as I understand it, there's like they had a lot of games played within their Stapleverse thing, but like there's like been like movements of like if you were this token, you got to be part of this camp, you're that camp, or
Mm.
whatever that camp. There's ways to like trigger actions and change the state of your NFT, stuff like this. Like a lot of these things, and you were to even push them even harder, they are. I just like that's where I do think like NFTs is kind of the most preserving medium of that experience where
Mm.
it gives you the securitization that it's has enough can hold enough value, it has the provenance to track it all for you so that your work your playthrough is very globally shared, and it's also something that people can also appreciate. And it's and also in a weird way I feel like NFTs in current modernity, because of their limited transactional state, because it's so costly to do transactions, creates like almost like a poetic style of game design where
Mm.
you're trying to extract a lot of symbolism and meaning out of very simple actions, right? Like as much as I've critiqued that the current NFT space has pretty much been around three main verbs: mint, burn, and stake. Um, we've gotten a lot of world building just from those three verbs, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because we're kind of like we bludgeoned ourselves to think that there's the only three verbs they are, and the only three that people are think are economically worth participating in, right? But in
Mm.
those three, we have already created a very poetic style of mechanical design. Now, if you were to add a few more words, I think that's where the end game actually lies. But we're just a little bit too young for that.
Mm-hmm.
But like indirectly, also, I kind of like this thing where like NFTs, you don't and maybe this is also a little too binary in saying this, but I feel like a really good NFT experience, it's not like you sit down and play it. It's like something that just kind of like you grow with you. Like you occasionally log onto the DApp and then you do something or you do that. Like
Mm.
it's not meant to be a playthrough experience. It's meant to be something that like, is in your life as a parallel a little bit, and you get to enjoy it within the community, but you get to leave it whenever you want as well. But it's not something you have to sit down and do. Like I'm like talking about a lot of like what I think it is, but more so I don't know
Mm-hmm.
what it actually like. I can't define exactly what the form is in this current promise, I think, of it all. But
Mm.
in some ways this is me trying to like go from traditional set theory of like I don't believe the best NFT experiences are going to be like Unreal Engine-ified things. So then from what for so you then start listing what is not that, and then you start going through what's not that and try to think what you think it actually is, right?
Mm.
But I don't think I have a lot of actual answers. I said a
I
lot of
mean,
nonsense. I think, right? Like,
I try to think about. Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly what you said. It's very difficult to define. All we can really try to think about maybe is our past and the types of games we've used or interacted with. I try to think about browser games, specifically the ones I would play in school, because they have to have a certain type of
predicting
quality.
games,
One,
mini clip.
Yeah.
they can't be the game itself can't be ongoing or continuous. Requires some kind of like long standing state because it's a browser game, so there's not necessarily
Mm.
like very big save state. You wouldn't want one too because it gets risky business,
right?
in the browser. It has to be something you can stop and start, go in and out because class, right? And yeah, it just can't be a fucking drag. It can't be too like ticky tacky and stuff like that. So Cookie Clicker is a game I always think about. It's like if I could replicate whatever X amount of time I played Cookie Clicker, if I could replicate that experience for a moment in 2022, sick. It would be sick. I don't know if you remember that game or ever you've seen it, but the concept is so simple. It's like there's a cookie, you click it, and you get more cookies, and then eventually you get enough cookies that you can buy auto clickers, and they click for you. So then once you get from there, it just starts escalating very fast.
Do you guys consider SCP a game? I mean, like, I know loosely defined, but like that whole world building aspect, it does feel gamified in some aspect, but perhaps it falls more into the genre you were talking about, Dave.
It has game traits. I feel like you can map a lot of game metaphors. Like I like to think any good game you need to have a lot of different audiences being able to appreciate it. Like if there's like a viewing audience is like allowed to just enjoy it out of just viewing somebody else play it through, I think it's very powerful, and that makes a game very good.
Right.
But two is I do think like SCP does well as a general collective of lore is it's kind of like an open world in the sense that like you go in, there's not enough like directorial guidelines, I guess, if that's the right way to say it, of like you can't go to that area of the map. We literally have not designed it, kind of a thing in the SCP world. It's like if you dare to go, you dare to go, and you get to manifest what you think that looks like. Yeah. And so it's like a character. So you as a player, you go into the world and you so feel like it. You play by writing into it, right? And if that's the action that you would call playing, then I can see it having game-like features. I think a lot of people maybe map the stigma of games now with like a game studio and your relationship to that studio. Like, I think a lot of folks when they think of a game, they're like, okay, what am I paying up to enjoy this experience, right? Am I paying up front in money, or am I having, is it a pay to win? Is there DLCs? Is it a live service? You kind of have this, you establish a relationship with some thing that's giving you a thing to play in, where I think SCP doesn't follow that, and that's where I think a lot of people will be like, it's not a game because I'm not yelling at a developer or something, right? But in some ways your experience with it is very game-like, right? And
yeah, I mean, I see SCP similar to a subreddit, and then the most game-like subreddit I can think of is like Wall Street Bets,
right?
Type of,
yeah.
Or I'm just coming up with examples, not necessarily not perfectly.
I came across a funny SCP tale. Alex Thorley eats a burger. And I'm just looking at it, and the way they like dramatize eating this burger, the experience. The first line is, there's a line on the floor where the linoleum ends and the Burger King begins. I'm like, okay, and they even include like an image that I was thinking like, okay, if this image was tokenized and all of the text was the metadata here, this would fall into what you were talking about, Dave, kind of, right? Filling in that void.
Yeah, it's, and I think that's, to even dial it back to ABF, I feel like that's the world effect we want. It's like we're not directorially making Star Wars or making I don't know anything that's related to the SCP that's directorial right now. I can't think of it. It's like we're creating the rules of the land, but then I don't think the feeling should be like, oh, this is an unexplored area of the world. Did the developers allow me here, or did I accidentally happen upon it? That shouldn't be the feeling. It should be like, it's unexplored. Let me explore it and define some stuff of it, right? But like in the beginning, obviously, we were going to start setting some of the land, like pretty much.
I mean, it really is.
Are.
It is it is kind of like a nice combo between the SCP and Wall Street Bets in that aspect, where like you need that degen memery to create incentive for why you would want to push yourself to write in this, right? Beyond just creating some narrative, because see, SCP itself would not work if it was just NFTs, right? Because then it would ruin the fun of writing. It would be weird, right? So it's always a mishmash of those ideas.
So wouldn't this all just get back to, like you said, the fun factor then? And wouldn't whether or not it's a game maybe be more contingent on how much fun you have when you enter that universe, perhaps? Because we ultimately play games to have fun.
Yep.
Even the most simple of games are to derive fun.
Yeah.
Right?
Getting cookies for no reason.
Yeah, I mean, right? I feel like ABF, right? We chose BF because in some ways I do think that is probably the most fun language to write in. It's like fun in the way that like you're playing like Super Mario 64 compared to playing like Fortnite kind of fun, where you're like,
right,
you know, you're playing a platformer. You're obviously not going to be able to do everything you can do, but then too, it's like also like we have such a range of tooling that exists already, but can exist in the future, that like says, hey, like I don't want to play this game the way that people play it, which is right brain fuck, because it just doesn't interest me. But I like other aspects of this world, and I would love to play that part of it. You know,
right.
That could be a very exciting way to enjoy ABF.
Some of the best games, the quality that makes it fun on a micro level is just giving the players option, right? And that's a big part of what ABF is like, look, there is no right way to play the game, right? It's like, if you don't want to use the brain fuck, you don't technically have to. You could figure out a way to like get around that.
You can use mix-ins, right?
Yeah, or not even that. It's like you just write a special purpose renderer for whatever you want, and you use that brain fuck to do something else. You know, you use that area to do something else. There's no right way to do it. So I think that optionality is what makes it fun in many aspects. Like,
which, you know, to make a comment here, I feel like we need that in the NFT space, period. I felt like there's, especially when there's so much money on the line with a good project, people are all caring about doing it the right way, not the fun way. Right. And I think that's where ABF is like a very big counter reaction. It's like, hey, you know, we as a studio sacrificed power and control over a white labeled experience because we believe and we want to serve maximally the fun of it, right? Which means, as Ash implied, you could be a Solidity monkey and write a renderer that's very powerful, that does all the work for you, or you could like only brainfuck, or you could be a traditional artist and just convert it into BF, or you could just be enjoying the lore experience, right? Like the range, or you could just be a collector. I think a collector is part of the game, right? You're a player in the game. Like you're collecting, right? Like it's, you know, the fact that I don't think we want to set any rules, or it is no objectively powerful things. And if not, I'd like to think that behind the scenes, we haven't talked about every freaking feature we have. A lot of the features we have designed into the NFT, if used, I hope makes these roles in this world more empowered, right? And they could range from, you know, being able to tip the right people to other nuances, but like we quite literally wanted to design pretty much just like what could be like if you were to really take a generative art platform and make it and translate that metaphor to an open world, what would it look like? And to an argument, I think that's where ABF is kind of trended towards, right? And it has become and is becoming, right? And you know, as kind of the stewards of it, it does create a weird challenge, right? It's not like we're art blocks gating like the front doors and only letting the people we believe are going to do the right thing on the protocol, and then put all of our weight behind them such that they sell to the other players, right? Like we don't have that gate, right? So we have a very different problem space when it comes to like,
yeah,
how do we nurture something?
Yeah,
right?
I mean, this is like, this is back in many ways back to what we were supposed to be doing. Is the way I see it in a lot of regards, because before all the NFT stuff, people were still making this stuff with no promise of money. As in, why did they make Cookie
Absolutely.
Clicker?
Yeah.
Right? Why in the hell did they make Cookie Clicker? Like the person who did that. So, I don't know. That's what we need. That's what the space actually needs, in my opinion. And as many
especially in the
ways
bear
as
market. I think that's when the bear this is like bear market should be back to being having fun, right, and
Right.
experimenting. I think when you're trying to forcefully rationalize price action and price movements, it's it
Yeah.
usually I don't think gives you enough upside beyond just juicing what's left of the prior bull market. And so yeah, and I think we're feeling that trend internally from conversations with other teams too, the right teams that I think a lot of teams are seeking now a generation of tools that will enable them to create experimental fun in an NFT
Right.
way, and um, yeah, and I like to think that we should be proud that we're kind of on the knife's edge here, trying to figure that out before a lot of people, right? Not to say we have the right answers ever, but
Yeah.
we
We
we could
we
definitely
care
tell you where
most
not
about
to go,
fun.
right? Like
Right.
which direction to not to go because we may have learned that that was not the right
yeah.
path, right?
I mean, I think naturally, probably we'll see many more fun designs involving money
Yeah.
naturally emerge as gas fees drop, or the ability
Mm.
to do smaller and smaller transactions. Like,
Yeah, it's like
Right.
when
yeah,
Yeah.
when
You're
I think
right.
about the bull market in NFT, there was like hash masks came out, and I felt like hash mask was very much so like a group of people's passion project. Like it
Mm-hmm.
felt like a very like just you took all the craziest artists, you put them together. You had this
Mm-hmm.
weird name token thing that allowed you. It was like a very like it was born out of fun. Like that thing was felt like it was born out of fun.
Yeah.
Um, and then like Euler Beats felt like it was born out of some tech genius's fun, right? Like the guy just
Mm.
wanted to do mathematical based Euler styled art, music, a
Right.
weird price mechanic design that I still frankly do not have an understanding of. But then it became eventually very soon was there was a formula to create NFTs, which was
Mm.
10K supply, this and that. Your page looks like this. Get the right people to do this, right? And it just kind of became capitalized, right? Like it was something that if there was enough money upside that you had to compromise on creativity to
Mm.
get the upside of capital. And not to say there hasn't been projects along the way that have been very successful that were more creative than not, but I remember then there was a project that was like something called Pineapple or something, where you staked Pineapple ERC20 tokens to
Oh, that
yield
sounds
farm like
familiar.
NFTs. And that was like a very fun, weird thing that happened for a month before it died off. And people just said, I'm too lazy to stake Pineapple. I just want to buy it in a gas war. So
Yeah.
that kind of drained away, right? So I think in some ways we are collectively all kind of revisiting what brought us all here, kind of energy, right? And for me,
yeah.
and I think for some of us, like for me, it was revisiting hash era energies,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
London era
Mm-hmm.
Well,
energies, like that.
there is still significant friction, I would say, in the space to get to that point. I would say mainly due to
Right.
VC funding. I mean, there's no way around it. I'm not really complaining. I'm just saying it's a reality, right? The situation is like if you have VC funded teams, all these teams are going to try to go to market with a product that's and try to make as much money as possible. It's not. We no longer live in an addicting games world, and
Yeah.
figuring out how to recreate that
Mm.
environment will be very interesting, I
I
think.
don't think we will be able to recreate it. More so, it's going to be like I think like the
Anything's possible.
Steam. It's more like I think there's going to be like
Believe.
a I think there's going to be like a a plane of the world where it's like a Steam indie world almost, where
Right.
like they have a place in a undeniable place that no AAA title games can really dare to even touch. Like
You're right. Yeah.
those like indie games, they hold a very special spot in a lot of people's hearts, and it's something that like defensible speaking is ironically
Yeah.
very defensible
Well,
by the fact
it's
that they're not
absolutely
high budget
Mm.
things.
essential that people are doing irrational things, in my opinion, right? It's absolutely essential for mankind. Like if we're all just like being funded and building products, like it's not gonna It can go dark quickly, you know.
Yeah.
So that's why.
What do you guys think the most fun experience you've had on chain has been so far?
That's a good question.
To say something that I've not personally had a touch on building, I think, because a lot of the things I had a blessing of being able to be part of building was very, very fun.
Right.
Let me think. I do think the terraform was quite just brought me back to just why I cared about NFTs kind of energy.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I didn't do any of the dream state stuff personally, but I just kind of liked exploring that world. I will say I've personally, out of mental brain power, haven't done too many mechanically complex NFT experiences, and maybe Ash, you can talk about Mars a little bit in that way.
I was just gonna say that. That's my only top favorite besides Hash and ABF. I'd say like Mars is the only thing that makes me. That was very memorable. Everything else was just buying something off secondary. Even Terraforms, like I really liked it, but I never did any of the daydreaming, like any of the hardcore stuff. But Mars was actually an experience because one, you can't buy it secondary, and then two, these are all handmade by a guy that I met in person, right? So it feels very personal. And then losing a blind auction just gets you tilted, right? That feeling is
totally
very fresh.
I mean,
you don't get that often, right? Yeah.
Right. Especially if they bid like 3 days before and you didn't see their bid down.
Yeah, and you're like,
down
what
the
the
list there.
fuck?
Yeah.
You're like, God damn it, it was right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, all that. So
right. Yeah. For myself, like I will say, Hash has probably been the most fun product I've used in the space. Just the process of learning how to actually explore Etherscan, how to verify whether it was or was not the original contract that you're actually trying to mint. Just going through that whole like historians, like what do they call that? The digital archaeology process. The self-proclaimed digital archaeologists because they can read Etherscan transactions, right? Yeah, that whole experience of just being able to even just like for myself, like mint a personal hash and go back into my Saga and see what I've done and take a piece of that and put it on a chain. Like that's really fun. Like it was actually one of the first. It was probably the first product that actually made me think like, oh wow, like NFTs can be fun, like can be a lot of fun. Obviously,
especially the UI David made. Like I still talk about that every fucking episode. I love it so goddamn much. Like I just the first time I saw it, I was like, this is it. This is why like this shit exists. Like
right.
So it was definitely fun.
I think that was my UI peak in my life. I don't think I'm getting closer again. Like it. I mean, we definitely had to go. We kind of outgrew that UI eventually.
Yeah.
More than anything else. I felt like for me, like Hash, being that I didn't have quite the opportunity to do a lot of hunting myself, but more so I had to just kind of be there and help people hunt. It just kind of was weird just seeing, what you thought was gonna do this, not do it at all, and do something that is completely emergent from how people have interpreted something that you didn't really exhaustively say out loud, right? Like I think there was a design in Hash where I personally found 2,555 moments of history, and then I sold it to you, the public.
Yeah, you could have done that, right? You could have done that,
right? Like that was one of the design processes, but then it was just like, for one, I was lazy. I didn't want to go and do that myself. That was big
Too
reason.
Much work.
But
right.
two was just like, that's kind of the part of that was the fun of it, right? And
it all made sense. Like that first release all made sense perfectly, right? The increasing price, like it being fully greenfield for you to like mint whatever history you want, and like every decision matters. Like that is a game. That is a game, right?
Yeah, and at the time I was very inspired by war paintings that people would do to recreate moments of just very historical conflicts or war photography. And I was like, well, we don't look at our span of history through the lens of one person. It's like
Right.
it's through artists, photographers, even offhand photography or evidence. It's like a very pluralistic way of collecting history, and it was like that way kind of made sense to me that hash couldn't be directorial in that way where I chose what is history. It had to be people going out and taking the photographs themselves, painting it themselves. And so that was something, and I remember the very first landing page, there was quite literally a painting on it from the French Revolution. And that was a very big inspiration for me because it was like, we're gonna do that, but with Ethereum. That was like the creation story in some ways, of the creation motivation in some ways.
Who verified that first ETH transaction?
That was a whole process, if I remember.
Because Bullet Eye and those guys did it, right?
I feel like it would have been very difficult to go back and verify.
Because it was like the first few blocks didn't actually have transactions, so you had to like figure that out. So I do think those guys did the gracious work of figuring out. In fact, that this is...
I think it was Bullet Eye and NC handle that, from my memory.
I found this video. I want to pull it up. You guys probably have seen it. I think it's like the coolest thing that this exists. Right? Like just like the coolest thing. And like I actually hadn't seen this video before, to just kind of see that somebody, we knew the mural was done, but this just makes it feel more real to see an actual video showing off the first ETH transaction in Western Australia. It's like the coolest thing, right?
Yeah, and I feel like that's I keep thinking in a way that like that's how we kind of should continue to operate as a studio, and that we're just not ever going to be able to create something of the scale that a VC-backed company can create. But like, and I'm certain that there's like the Stapleverse made by the great folks at Future Primitive, and they are venture backed. They were able to make that universe, scale it in the way that they scaled it, in a very powerful way. And for us, it's like, I don't know if we could do that, but we'll do something else, and we're going to do it better than probably any other entity. And when we do want to go to physical, we'll do it in a way that reflects the most poetic way that we can do in our scale, right? And I think just having such a large scale presentation of a hash, obviously it's not as amazing and cool as some of the Stapleverse projects. I think for how much we have committed, it's very, very, very symbolic, I think, and powerful. And it's kind of us punching higher than what I think I can't think of the quote right now.
Punching up.
Punching up. God, punching up. My brain's fried today. Punching up, right? Above our weight class. So I feel like we're always going to be between that line, right? Choosing those battles, right? That we know that being the mouse in the being able to crawl through these small crevices, and the elephant not being able to go through. That's our battle space, right?
Going back to what we were talking about before about hash masks, like what the heck happened there? I mean, because I remember when it came out, there was a lot of hype. I wanted a hash mask so bad. Like there were so many cool ones out there. But what happened that made it?
I don't have the full understanding.
Yeah.
But the key thing in my eyes was hash mask cleared a lot of the mistakes and the successes of what is our current modern definition of a PFP company and endeavor. For lack of a better way to say it, hash mask definitely felt was born out of the bear market, where values was held higher more than it was about the IP, the values of a collective creating art. And so in such a way, it went decentralized very fast. The name token didn't really quite do what it was supposed to do when it comes to creating a stickiness to it. The 3 is, for lack of a better way to say it, it's not PFP art. It's just not PFP art. You look at it, the background's too noisy. The foreground isn't like collectively all like instantly readable collective. Like this is something that Bored Apes. The more you think about it, it's like that was designed and almost engineered, read well, in like a
Yeah, your internet's cutting out a little bit.
whereas this doesn't have that quite that trait. And then they tried to DAOify themselves very early.
Right.
But in that process, they lost a lot of steam, and in losing steam, you had a very competitive market where there was the Bored Apes, there was all these other PFP collections claiming that lion's share that you thought you had, and I think eventually you lose your capital markets. It starts becoming a losing battle very fast, which is unfortunate. But in some ways, it's like if you want to like get a crash course of how do you run a NFT business and learn from a project, figuring out the case study of like hash masks to equality is very, very useful, right?
So what do you think about this?
Market.
And do you think it's like, or if you're a project, you have to make a decision. It's like either do nothing or you're going all the way and you have to be successful. Because if you try to do stuff like, keep stickiness, accelerate growth and whatnot, and use half-assed it or you stop midway or you're not 100% successful at it, then it's gonna fail all the way. Is that? Do you think as like a binary thing? It's like you have to either not do anything.
Well, it depends on what means failure to you. In like as a studio for us, I don't qualify that every one of our projects has to hit that kind of mark, because if that project gets us to the next performance as a studio, it passed like the grade, right? Obviously, it didn't get us a success metric, but it passed the grade, right? But then for like a hash masks, it was all or nothing, right? Like, how to make it or not, or if not, then the collective would have disbanded, right? And we're right. Could there have been that argument for like stuff that has happened with other projects where they pretty much had built a revenue model that was all
it'd still be like it would still be historical, right? Like in a hash mask, if they chose to disband, like sell and then chose to disband, not do anything else, they could have maybe retained some amount of like there's some mythos, I guess, around that event that would create a stopping point, right, for a project. I would see it similar to like if I bought some band's album and then they reveal after the fact that they're gonna stop, they're gonna break up and not make any more. That last album still feels like I wouldn't sell it. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, I mean, like it's a non-zero market floor price, right? It has value now, in the competitive market of NFT value. It made, I guess, it's priced as such that it's lower than a Bored Ape, right? So there's, I think, some amount of pragma that's happening, and comparatively saying the Bored Ape has that, by some miracle, found that flywheel, and was able to fan into all living hell, right? But like I think it's kind of like I think a better way to even think of it is like the best examples like CryptoPunks, Autoglyphs, right? Like these kind of endeavored projects where like they didn't have roadmaps, like they just those two fuckers just like came out of the door, Larva Labs, and it's like they're gonna create something. It was pretty visionary at the time. Created it in a very intentional way. They created something that was a very, 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 very investable asset, in the sense that like the 24 by 24 pixel grid. You gotta. I just can't fault CryptoPunks for this. It's just more readable than a hash mask, even though hash mask has like 99x more pixels, right? Like that CryptoPunks brand is stronger in that way, right? And in that way, in its minimalism and lack of tokenomics, and also its presence, as kind of Ash implied, it's like this kind of was the last proper NFT hurrah from the Larva Boys. I think Meebips was just a cash grab. It's like as if you just like literally put all your greatest hits together and create a new album.
Right.
I feel like Autoglyphs and CryptoPunks, in some ways, people can think of them as like this are the last remnants of that era of high quality NFTs and the bands of that era, right? And
Interesting. Yeah.
I'd love to own an autoglyphs almost even half as I think they're aesthetically pleasing, but also I feel like it's like a big like way to say to the world like you own a proper thing of that era of that art movement, right? Which of that time, there's only like those two projects. There's the crypto, what's it called? Crypto art with an E, whatever. It's like a grid of little triangle things. I don't know what they're called. But there was a few Moon-Cats, right? There was a few projects of that era that was that defined that NFT art movement, and I think punks came in and became king, right? Maybe hash masks can, but hash masks is part of that. I would say they've been categorized in the movement that is part of the Bored Apes kind of era of art, right? And if that's the case, I do believe in like what do you call it? Like aggregation theory that like it usually things don't get ranked numerically, as in like you're number one and then you're linearly you're number two. It's like you're either number one because you have like a massive ass margin, and then there's number two, and then number three, number four. But it's like an exponential decay more than it's a linear decay of your market cap, your size. So being number two in that era is already like that's cool,
right?
But like by the time you're number 10, you're forgotten, right? Like after the next movement comes in, right? And
right.
So
on hash masks, do you think they leaned too much into their NCT token model for their name change token? Because I mean, they had an emission rate and everything set where you can only have so many.
The emission rate was a little high, if I remember. And pretty much nuked the tokens value to 0.
Right.
But frankly, all the projects of that era that was exploring ERC20 interactions with 721s, and I still don't really quite think there's been a lot of great experimentations with this interaction. I think there's not been a lot that's done well, even like the ape coin, right? Like it.
Right.
I just don't think that was a very successful reflection of a NFT ecosystem implicating a ape coin, because I felt like that thing was just dumped to all hell in the beginning, and then the people that were collecting the dust and trying to make something out of it had to go through so much political contention that like it pretty much is like NCT's the name DAO whatever they call it, hash mash DAO, but played at a larger scale, where like the more political like you create an ape coin, the moment you release it, you have a finite amount of political capital, right?
Right.
And if you start draining that out, you have a coin that doesn't have value anymore, right? And I don't know where they are in this state curve of where they are, how much left political capital the ape coin has, but I don't think they had the best first steps. That was the best use of such capital.
Yeah.
But then welcome to DAOs. Like they're never I don't think there's been a lot of DAOs that made all the right steps along the way, right? Like they all fumble in real time. So
I'm curious if actual gas prices affected some of these organizations, because like I'm sure it was easy to convince people to go, buy an NCT and change your name when you were paying $6 to change the name, but now all of a sudden you're paying $60 to $150 to change the name. It just like kills the fun factor.
And you know what? The fact that Bored Apes was able to get such a high value with literally Bored Ape number 555 without any names, I think it's just like people were just like, wait, shit. The name, it doesn't matter. The image matters. Like that's where the value and and I think that was just like a weird, like lazy money makers started moving their money away, and the capital loss started to affect everybody. Kind of a problem, right?
Right.
Which still sucks. I still think like an NFT is the contingent of all its metadata than that of just the image. But we live in a world where the description is always the same. The name is literally just a numerical value, and the attributes are just derived from the image. It's like experientially, we could do a lot more. It's just a JSON object, right? It's just a generic shaped thing that we standardize to, right? And even by suggesting names in London Gift, we were just trying to say, hey, the names can have value, right? Like that is a totally open space to express things, right? And it's still a bummer. I feel like it's a big loss of this bull market that we didn't do
Definitely
more.
in like unexplored avenue. Like I actually wonder what would the Bored Ape environment would look like today if it was like, this is Bored Ape 555. His name's Todd. You know, like this is Bored Ape 432. This is Wendy. You know what I mean? I'm curious if people would have bought into that more or less.
Yeah, I feel like it would have been interesting how the communities would have congregated, right? Like it, you know, there's like in the Azuki world, there's like the spirit Azuki DAO, which is all the spirit Azukis.
Right,
They don't have
yeah.
names, but like they did congregate on shared identity, right? And
Right.
it would have been funny if like all the, as you kind of using your words, the Wendy Bored Apes collectively made the Wendy DAO, and
That would have been cool.
and they literally ripped off the Wendy's picture, right? Whatever.
But can't they do that? Because, like, for example, there's a community that formed for like just an instant and kind of seemed to fizzle off. But it was a Robotos community where it was like, okay, we want all the like Mohawk Robotos to get together. We want all the, you know what I mean? Like it was like all based on traits.
Yeah. Question for you, Dave. It's like, do you think in 5 years PFPs will even really be a concept?
Yes, 100%. They have a very strong investable place in this world. The security guarantees that like their inflation supply is effectively zero, or negative due to inflation. Not inflation, but negative due to burning.
Okay, yeah.
That is a pretty strong thing. But then compared to a ERC-20 with only 10,000, these 10,000 have a more of a stronger meme.
But yeah, so if you're comparing it to ERC-20s, I'm talking in fast forward to 5 years in the future when there's a huge universe of NFTs, right? Is PFP
they will hold, I think, the minimalism that Bitcoin would hold, and then like in the greater base chain world, it's like when I own a CryptoPunk, what am I really owning? I'm owning something that like doesn't even have a backing team behind it anymore, really. Like I guess you can say Yuga Labs, but the fact that the thing still holds value pretty much tells me is like this thing doesn't need a core team, to be able to retain, if not grow in value, given that the world is willing to appreciate what it is, right? Like you, reductively speaking, it's a very minimalist investment where you're like, there's only 10,000 of them or whatever, right?
Yeah.
It's an ERC 721. You get the guarantees.
I agree. I definitely
it's
agree
investable,
with
right? Like,
the early phrase stuff is investable. Like I predict, what I hope we would have a part in making happen in 5 years is that PFPs themselves are a mostly irrelevant concept within the NFT space from a new creation standpoint. Maybe like phase one NFTs.
I think the old ones will keep around.
Yeah, the very old ones that don't have core teams will have a historical NFT context. I don't think things like Azuki, where there's a team really providing rocket fuel behind a PFP narrative, I think that will not even exist as a concept, really.
Wouldn't that be more like contingent on world building though? Like how big they build out their platform and how much the community builds on it?
It doesn't last 5 years. Nothing ever does, right?
Well, that's where all these teams are doing exit strategies, right? Like the Ape coin, the Ape DAO, it literally exists as like an exit ticket for the core team in some ways.
For the core team again, right? But I'm still taking a step back and looking at the entire concept, right? What's going to happen to Ape DAO in 5 years? It's a good question.
Which is a very, very contentious and fair thing to say. It's like you can flip a coin and say, well, does any of these exit strategies actually work in 5 years? Because if they don't, they don't, right? Like,
I mean, ideally, what I think is happening, like, if we can prove an addicting game style project, essentially that has like very tight monetary game mechanics, then that will prove that will become an emergent trend. Just off one example, I think. Ideally, if we can make that happen.
What are your thoughts on like the Gary Vee style, where he's building out basically IP that he's planning to build out in physical products and real life benefits? And
it doesn't work. These guys are trying to play the Disney Pixar game. It's not going to work. So you have to have native economies, right? And so everything like at least in 5 years. 5 years is actually a quick time span, but still long enough where we really don't know what's going to happen, right? Like 2 years, PFPs are just over around. 3 years, maybe, right? 4 years, we really don't know. 5, we don't. So,
well, 5 years ago was 2017, right?
Yes.
That was post ICO, right?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get a context of time right now.
Yeah, get context.
Yeah, 5 years is a lot in crypto.
It definitely is.
5 years ago, yeah, 5 years ago. 5 years ago, David in crypto is a dumbass, like, and the whole space is collectively now like has like 3 brain cells at the time compared to how much we know now, right?
But I like to see the comparison of the NFT, the ERCs, the small PFP collections to being better than ERC20s. That's a good comparison. I just don't think that's not going to fuel new projects. Right? It's
oh no, I don't. I feel like I'm saying like the contingent of like, I own a CryptoPunk, right? It's like do I have an immediate plan to want to sell it? No, like,
and that's independent of what happens.
But I haven't bought a new PFP meaningfully, like a new project PFP in a really long time, right? Like, I bought
I mean, the reason why I'm asking the question is because it does. I think we're reaching a point where it's like it becomes almost irrelevant to think about like what is the correct way to do the PFP project or like why was it successful. It really it doesn't matter anymore, right? Almost to an extent. Or maybe it's temporal.
What do you mean it doesn't matter?
Like it may be a temporal phenomenon that only exists within 2 years.
Wait, so what do you mean by it doesn't matter? Like, doesn't matter to the greater legacy of NFTs, or because it did matter to Goblin Town when they made a fuckload of money, right? I'm just trying to understand what you mean by what.
I guess like what I mean is like if we were to really look far out, it's like what's the interesting ideas and what to do next, right? It's like trying to look at how what were the qualities of PFPs that made it successful may be completely irrelevant to what's really going to happen in 4 years or 5 years.
See, I can see this going 2 ways. It's like it's kind of contingent on how much I believe I don't know what I don't know, kind of a thing. So it could either just freaking die out and just become like a generational thing, or 2, it kind of plays into flavors of like first-person shooters. Just people literally just within the confines of FPS keep on figuring shit out about how you can innovate in FPS, right? Like, it wasn't for Titanfall, I feel like Titanfall really made a huge revolution with being able to effectively parkour on your map, and like you had like a lot of axes of movement, right? And then
that was
like
the only innovation in a long time. Big innovation,
right? Great, so like, but like, so the pretty much is like when I'm going back to is like I don't know what I don't know kind of a problem. It's like if I think I don't know a lot, maybe I'd lean to that more cautious side. But if I feel like a little bit more pessimistic, then I'd say be a while before we have another Titanfall level movement where like
that makes sense. And it really comes down to the question is like how much do you think PFPs is in itself a genre like FPS is?
You're right, and to continue in that metaphor, it's like the recent Call of Duty Modern Warfare, right? Like you played a game, it literally did not do anything innovative. To be fair, like maybe the customization, but the customization is a derivation of what they did before. But like what the game did well was the same old formula, right? But optimized and cleaned up so well that it's just literally is like the most refined classic FPS style game. You didn't have any parkour shit. It was just a very mechanically tight old FPS game, right? And it almost had like a little revival of that movement. So like I wouldn't say PFPs will die. It's more so like I don't think we'll see what we've seen now. Maybe there's going to be a random pop up at PFP 3 years down the line that's like revives some of that old sentiment again because they just cleaned it up again, like cleaned up the stylizing of it. I don't know. It's the gamut is a little hard to predict.
Yeah.
So part of the question is also trying to come up with like, what do I do, right?
Or you could say this about action movies, right? Like when we had the Sylvester Stallone, like in the 80s, 90s, and then we moved into like the Jason Statham, like a little bit CGI heavy, very shitty camera work, kind of styled work. And then I felt like there was like a studio level rut because those movies just didn't make money. And then like you had the John Wicks.
Yeah.
And so John Wick almost like gave a revival. Right.
Yeah, like we could like
to that kind of action star persona character, right? Like how many like action star based Like that just does non-CGI based based.
Exactly right. It's like what I hope to happen in 4 or 5 years is that we don't continue an aggregation of brands. Like that's not the point of why we're doing this or why we're working crypto, right? It's for everything to just accrue into and aggregate into a few different players. I think it's so. Even if we were to compare that to the analogy of movie industry, yes, we definitely see aggregation of viewership and brands, right? We see Marvel stuff like Marvel, but there's still a lot of pushback from the independent side. Like A24s are willing to put a lot of money behind, 50-50 shots at a franchise, essentially, right? Like X is a very recent example. He just wrote himself into a horror franchise. Or the John Wick is a very good example. All the recent things in the last 5, 6, 7 years. So
yeah, which I like to believe that's like a very natural
reaction.
Yeah. A industry goes through. Like I think that is more the normal than the odd in every industry. Is like you have the more big players that have to play a little bit by the books because there's just too much stake to go deviate. But then there's going to be people that are, punching above their weight and able to deploy capital and money and talent in a way that really takes on new things, but also reflects upon all the past history of that industry. And I think like you see that with like modern like retro platformers, like what is it, like Hyperlight Drifter, which is not a platformer, is a or like Stardew Valley. These kind of games are all pixel art, right? Like everybody would say pixel art is days old, right? But like they refined it, they pushed it. And I think you see this in the movie industry as well, right? And I think maybe to an extent you can say this, and I'm gonna maybe be if I'm totally wrong. I think one of you guys would correct me, but maybe I think you see this in the music industry as well, right? You got the big players, the pop musics, and then there is a area of that creative space that I hope is remixing the past but introducing the new. For me, I think of like old John Bellin when I was listening to him a lot, where he was using his vocals as almost an instrument, and I just to do like hip hop, and I thought that was really interesting. But I'm talking out of my ass here because musically speaking, I am brain dead. So,
the Uncharted Waters is just so hard to feel out. Like even getting back to the FPS thing, after Titanfall, they put out what was it like Call of Duty Advanced Warfare, and everybody was freaking pissed because now you could just jump way up and everything kind of changed dynamically, and they had to walk that back. Right.
So are we seeing this with like battle royales right now with games?
Yeah.
Like
everybody
and their mother's doing a battle royale, right? Like
yeah.
I don't know. It's like that expansion contraction phase.
Yes.
That happens. But I feel like at the end of it, you still have the few good ones that will survive it all. And then like I feel like what in some ways battle royale is a kind of a derivation of what is like those big team battle kind of style FPS experiences, but then you add in a little bit more of the open world magic of like discovering things. You remixed it. You got battle royale, right? Like if you think about the modern Dota, like MOBA style game genre, it wasn't very strong, inspired by the Warcraft like hero game mechanics. I don't quite know. I don't never played Warcraft 3 or Warcraft 2. So it's like very you could trace the lineage, like you could trace the genetic lineage of
that's right, yeah,
of these things. And I think we'll go to a future where we'll see PFPs and you can trace their lineage, or not PFPs, whatever we call them in the future, and trace their lineage back down to the Bored Apes of our era, right? And I would say Bored Apes is traceable to Hashmask, because I think they did a lot of things in reaction to what Hashmask didn't pull off, even in its very short time span, right? And like, right, you can even say this about DeFi 2.0 is a huge reaction to the whole yield farming thing. I don't think it's a great success story of it yet, but like, I mean, everything is reactionary, right? So
let's pick apart the whole Pixar thing too. Like, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that a little more, Ash. Like, why you don't see a VFriends model succeeding? Because in context of lineage, like what he's saying would be very valid, right? Like, let's say that 5 years from now, VFriends is this build-out platform with 1,000 different characters, and each character is kind of involved in the world a little differently and has its own connection to the person who owns it. you'll be able to trace that back to the original VFriend Season 1 and the NFT PFP that you bought.
Because
And so,
it has to work for kids. Because it has to work for kids. Like the best part of any game design is that it was free back in the day, right? And so it's accessible to kids, basically. And so that was the magic of Bitcoin. It was like the promise that, oh, that's a natural transition for me from as a lifespan, right? Literally, quite literally. It's like doing stuff online, and now there's a monetary association to that. Like,
wouldn't it make
Pixel? Go ahead. Yeah, like I'm just thinking like the toy model and like building shit out. It's like it really has to work from the ground up, and if you were not able to like do that in a way that makes sense, like
I guess in my mind, I'm thinking maybe it can make sense. Like if let's say I'm a I don't know, a Fortnite player, and I absolutely love the one character I'm playing with. As a kid, wouldn't it seem like a natural transaction to be like, yo, now that I've got some money and I'm old enough and I can verify my age, I can actually own my favorite player. And then you enter into this world, and that favorite player of yours is doing so much more. Like let's say in the VFriends case, where you've got a gift go, and that gift go continuously grants you access to different products and different partnerships. Like say Johnny Walker, hey, you're 21 now, go get your bottle of Johnny Walker. No, I'm just kidding. But actually, though, you know what I mean? Like it opens up doors to that character. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I just like I'm just thinking it's like how do you it has to work for free, like at the best type of game. It's like or if you're not doing that, it has to be tightly scoped to that monetary system. And but this is not it's not really that. It's like you're kind of buying I don't really understand it, honestly. I don't know the friends stuff that well. My initial reaction is that they're trying to go for the Toy Story model of like you make an IP and then you keep expanding, like it's classic stuff, right? Disney stuff.
For sure.
Maybe
I subscribe to the thought that there will be a successful version of it. I don't know if it's VFriends or not. Sounds like VFriends is the closest to it.
Right now, right?
And I'm kind of just at a place where like, so I'm just gonna be open minded about what I can learn from it. That's I don't personally have it. It's just not meant for me. I'm not its audience. It's like
the closest thing that's modern example of a toy that I can think of, physical franchise, maybe like the Pusheen. Do you know what that is? Pusheen cat?
No.
Sticker.
It's the cat.
Yeah, the cat stickers on Facebook, and that was originally from Facebook, right? So pretty much, and then
it's like a whole proliferated thing now, right?
Yeah, right. So that's
I do recognize this. Yeah,
and that's why
nobody knows the name. I feel like it's just like
but that's an important example because you've seen it, and all of a sudden you see it in real life. You're like, holy shit, right? And people who don't even know what it is are buying it just because it's cute, and so it's something organic. It's not like it doesn't exist because of its origins, sort of thing, right? And that's the whole thing.
I mean, to be fair, I feel like the fact that people shit on this part about PFPs was like, I can just right click and save your PFP. That's low key a really good part of it all.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
There is a free part of owning a PFP. It's just the image is your brand is distributable via digital channels, right? My only big thing with VFriends that I've never kind of been able to get over is just aesthetically. I never quite endured to it. For me, the big requirement if I ever were to own a PFP, especially a PFP, is I gotta actually like the artwork.
Absolutely.
Because if I don't, I'm just gonna paper hand it, and it's not worth my money in the first place. Then, so I don't know. I just I like to think I've had my own aesthetic understanding of what I like, and I do ascribe an aesthetic grade to like, is this something that I think has the aesthetic marketability to make a successful long-term NFT, which is to me like it has to fundamentally stand out amongst every other PFPs. Like when I think of like that grungy Bored Ape style, I think of Bored Apes. I can't think of any. I like when there was an era where you were thinking about gutter cats or whatever, like when there was people were fighting for that brand center.
Right.
There was a thing, right? And now we're seeing with the pixel art punks. Punks is still king, right? And there's an argument to be said that like this kind of anime flat style, like Azuki claimed it. Like that's their domain. I don't think another project can come through that looks like Azuki and beat Azuki out unless they did a miracle game strategy to it. And Cool Cats, I think, in that genre is kind of still in that fight with like the Doodles project, where like who gets to claim that kind of flat cartoon styled kind of thing, and you can place your bets where. And then there's like the more 3D styled with like Clone X, right? Like to me, there's genres of aesthetics that each PFP wants to claim,
right?
And you want to bet on the winning horse, because if you don't bet on the winning horse, you're just gonna lose all your money. That's my thought, my investment theory on PFPs. So
What about One Force One? Did Azuki kind of replace One Force One? Like it kind of felt a little bit like it. Maybe
yes.
Yeah.
I think One Force One was I remember I owned one briefly, but then I had to sell it at a loss. I think it just had you remember the Mechaverse project? I felt like it kind of like went out and collapsed way too much, leaving a void that Azuki just filled up again. Where I think like, and also in part I do think this is where like doing airdropped PFPs is like a low key a pretty smart business decision, because it's like Bored Apes. I owned a Bored Apes aesthetic of that kind of style, that kind of line art, that kind of aesthetic work. Instead of letting a competitor take out the cheaper price tiers of this aesthetic, I'm just going to give out an airdrop version of it and let the airdrop version claim the 20 ETH price tier, and then have my best one claim the 100 ETH price tier, right? And you're squeezing out the 20 ETH pricing range, right? And so, like, to me, it's like the PFP market can be really well read. And now I guess the Moonbirds is one of those marketplaces that's like, is this giving the pixel art style fight? But I think that in some ways, Moonbirds found its own like kind of like a modernized retro version of CryptoPunks, because it's color like aesthetically speaking quite different. Now, like that's where also I think I bought a few We're All Gonna Die NFTs, because I just felt like aesthetically speaking, I haven't quite seen this kind of medieval grungy pixel art ever in the PFP space, and it was like, if that's the case, I'll spend spend 0.2 ETH, get a few of them. If that genre of aesthetics becomes very valuable, then I hope I have the best horse in that race, right? So like, that's my standing philosophy. But personally, it's also very aesthetic driven. Like I don't own a lot of 3D PFPs because I just don't like them. I never liked them. I never found them to be something I aesthetically appeal to. But but in every genre, I only usually want to choose one horse. That's my philosophy in it. So, yeah. So I'm the Cool Cats holder, but I don't own really a lot of doodles. I may have owned one doodle in my past, but I've sold it at the wrong time. So now I only own Cool Cats, right? But I think right now it's still a strong fight between Doodles and Cool Cats, and I do think Doodles is winning it out right now. So it's a little bit bummer, but you bet on a horse. It's a bet.
Right. Did you guys ever hear about? I don't know if this is true or not, but Bored Ape, quote unquote, ripping off the Doggies NFT collection that came out before Bored Ape and has like very much the same traits, especially visually. And basically, it's one of those collections now that people are trying to argue is a historical NFT because it predates Bored Ape, and Bored Ape copied its traits. But I don't know if it actually copied it. I don't know if I should say that. But you guys know anything about that?
I mean, at the end of the day, money won, right?
Yeah, true.
I mean, I feel like at the end of the day, it's like the victors make the history, right?
Yeah.
Bored Ape Yuga Lab is going to make the history that favors them, and so what can we do about that, right? Like,
true.
So, and I feel like what does he call it? The Goblin Town kind of aesthetic has now claimed its own little genre. Which if you were to tell me fully pragmatically, if I didn't care about aesthetics, I would have bought one early. But like, I don't like the look of a goblin,
Same here,
so I'm never gonna buy one. Right? Like, so I just don't want to buy one, right? And there's obviously cases that does not work with this kind of theory that I operate under, but I also do that with generative art quite a bit too. Is I buy into aesthetic genres. And I think the only thing that kind of broke my kind of theory was buying into Mind the Gap from GM Studio, because
100%.
I would have said no. I would have just bought Fidenza, right?
Right.
So that's something I'm trying to reconcile with. But like, I just think that I'm making a hedge that GM DAO is going to be bigger than Art Blocks pretty much right now, because I think Art Blocks has overinflated their collections. And I think GM's DAO may be the better place for slower dripped, high quality art. That's pretty much the curated collection version. I don't know if I'm going to win this bet out or not, but it was a relatively cheap bet versus buying an 100 ETH Fidenza.
Right.
So
hasn't Art Blocks done like 2 billion in volume on secondary? Something crazy
I think
like
so.
that.
I also I say this as if I don't own Art Blocks. I own a few Art Blocks as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah, like I just like, if it's pretty much at a certain range, I have to actually think about, like, this is a lot of money. Like I can't just blow it on something that
Right.
I just like. So
Isn't it?
that's my DeFi side kicking in hard.
Right.
I think is just like, I have a very pragmatic sense to purchasing what I think I want to purchase, but then I've definitely lost my share of money buying into dipshit stuff because I fell into the FOMO. So lost my money, my fair share of change buying into dipshit PFPs. So
Have you guys what's the one PFP that you guys bought and you really wished it worked out but just couldn't hold up?
I bought a lot of hash masks. I used to own about 40 hash masks.
Yeah.
And now I don't. I own one. So
yeah.
it tells you how much I have conviction of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but like now it's like, also, like, I say this about these PFPs, that coming back on like legacy of 5 years from now. The fact that I can borrow collateral out of a Bored Ape, but
Yeah, that's nice.
not something else, that gives these things legacy, right? That there's actually soft economic utility. I cannot have to pay taxes on cap gains and pull out instant liquidity.
That's cool,
Right.
but like the protocol stays, like the assets that they support come and go, right? Of course.
Yeah, but it's like owning Bitcoin versus Bitcoin Cash. Like, which one is performing better? Like, right, like, it's, if you want to be borrowing, you want to be owning 2 Bitcoins versus Bitcoin Cash, right? Like,
okay, yeah. If you're, I'm just saying, yes, being able to borrow against NFT, the fact that that specific token was able to rise to that price, that's historic and important.
So it's like purely economical, than more so like good designed. I'm not saying Bored Apes did something they put them here.
But even from economical designs, like, like things like, there's no say. Of course, those things can collapse, right? At some point in time, they can, but they may not. I'm just not saying either way, but definitely can collapse.
Right.
The price completely. Right?
Yeah.
Eventually.
Yeah. I mean, well, it's dependent to how you interpret the statistics. At usually any given time, Bored Apes, CryptoPunk, I'm gonna be staying out of my ass. Only about 1 to 2% of it's listed, right?
Bored Apes.
Yeah, and so, just like in current bear market, about 380 ETH was cleared in 24 hours. That means about, what, like 5 NFTs were sold, right? So for the price crash to occur, you need to go from 1% listed to a little bit higher and have such strong FUD that people are tanking down to force liquidation, right? And so you can interpret that as incredibly fragile, or you can interpret it as, if you think that if people are diamond handing and you don't think you can crack that 1% further onwards of FUD, it can hold strong. But then it's like, you could say good or bad news from the same exact piece of evidence presented to you here. So
yeah, I mean, it's just the classic. If you are going to treat it like money, as a borrowing protocol does, right? Then you're going to have to care about centralization of control of what determines that value, right? That's what That's why we care about decentralized assets. If it was centralized, then we would have to trust that that person is going to maintain the value of that. And I don't know how much you can really trust Yuga Labs to do that.
Right? Well, how much is the value coming from Yuga Labs, and how much is it coming from Bored Apes themselves? Right, like it. In my eyes,
yeah, that's a Bitcoin versus like that's classic stuff. Yeah,
right. That's where like that's the shift of philosophy, and not shift of philosophy, but that's where you're making your bets on, right? Yeah. Like you're gonna lose a lot of money if you made the wrong bet there. That's your $1 million.
Yeah.
What's the ETH? Not $1 million, a few $100,000, whatever the floor price of Bored Ape question is right now. So yeah, we'll see. And to use Genie as a stat,
most things are more fragile than they seem. Is basically what I'm saying, right?
Yes,
you're absolutely
I agree,
right.
and
totally.
I agree. Which is like, I stand on the position that like, if you want to operate in a world where everything is glass and you can't break it, you're not gonna get anything done, right? Like,
right.
You gotta tear shit up, right? So, I play by fire. I know that I do that much, having borrowed quite a bit of ETH from my CryptoPunk, right? But I sleep well at night. What do you mean?
Sorry to interrupt you. How's that worked out for you? Like, have you found it to be a good strategy so far?
Yeah, I mean, I from the yield farming, I pretty much have net zero APY.
Okay.
And it's pretty much for me. It's like I bought the CryptoPunk at a rather high Ethereum price, so it offers a great opportunity to advantage yourself, given when you sell it for capital gain or loss.
Tax loss harvesting.
Right. So for me, my interest is accumulating Delta more ETH than the monetary USD value. So for that in mind, I'm a lot more interested in just sitting on it and waiting for the right strategic time to let it go and accumulate more ETH, but hopefully accumulate ETH at a cheaper price, right?
Right.
And be able to write off a lot of the upside for me, right? But in the short term, because I don't know, that day may take a while to happen, because when you have 1% listed, price moves slow, right? I was like, well, it'd be good sitting there, and I have no reason to want to sell it. Being able to pull out working capital in the form of ETH to say put in compound and do more saving, or purchase another token, or use that to liquidate into USDC. It's a very palpable power of having a punk, right? And it's kind of like I had an investment strategy for punk. I didn't have to change that strategy really to be able to get working capital today. And that's a power of like these lending protocols in some ways. Well, obviously, you're undergoing a deeper risk assessment because now you're putting your asset under effectively a debt position, and you got to understand that technically it has liquidation parameters that you need to be very, very aware of, because it's not an infinite pool of collateral that you can borrow an infinite amount of ETH out of, right? But for me, at least, is like I spent the weekend reading the whole entire Ben protocol smart contracts, and I was like, I understand the damage that can happen. So if I understand it, hopefully I can
mitigate that a bit.
Not mitigate it, but be aware when it happens, right? So one of the big things for me is I like about BenDAO is it has a 48-hour auction lock. So if your debt position does go under, they give you a 48-hour window to effectively pay it back and pay a little penalty, obviously. But the idea is that you got 48 hours to effectively do emergency liquidity pull from somewhere else to cover that position.
Really nice.
Which is comparatively speaking, which is why I don't like to do any leverage positions with ERC20s, because you got literally a block to try to run out a MEV bot to protect yourself, right? Whereas here, there is a 48-hour level protection, which I felt very agreeable to. And so I haven't done like I'm a pretty conservative player when it comes to any of my assets. I don't quite like to throw them into random protocols. I keep them in things I know that works, and I'm willing to compromise on earning 5% yield, or even not, like even a percent yield. I'll take 50 bips if that means I know this is safer, right? Like, and so bend is definitely the riskiest things I think I've done of recent, but like in such a way I'm doing it within my hopefully my risk parameters, which is it's a pretty much a OV protocol derived project. It's
Cut out again, Dave.
but you have 721s in it instead of 20s, right? And so if OV works, at least that part has held constant. So the only problem I had to deal with was liquidation design and making sure that's something that I felt like was good. And then 2 was governance design in such a way that they don't let bad collateral into the system, right? Like, what if they just allowed some no-name protocol in and people are borrowing money off of that no-name thing and collapses in value? CryptoPunks has to hold up the debt of that bad token, right? So those are the 2 big attack vectors in my eyes. And the liquidation protocols, it's been something I've been on the governance proposal forums and said my piece as well and tried to contribute to that, and pretty much was like, I think it's good enough. I think there's some area that's great. My biggest fear right now is actually the governance, because I do fear, like, from especially what we have seen recently with like Solend and everything.
Right.
Whale behavior can be very dangerous. And so this is also why I'm not selling any of my Ben tokens. Is like, if I need to vote, at least I have voting power to come in and vote. So like, I am sitting on like a few million Ben tokens. Also, because I'm very bullish, this protocol has a very strong value proposition. But I'm sitting on those as like a way to say, if there's a vote going through and I need to do what I can to help fight the other way, I'll do what I can, right? But like, obviously, this is a cost I pay for the upside of like pretty much 0% APY loans,
right,
from a lot of my assets. And if the asset goes higher in value, my relative debt is smaller, right? Also, the beauty, it's all in Ethereum. No USDC is involved. So I don't have to care about USDC to ETH to an NFT price. All I have to hold is ETH to NFT price, which makes the calculus so much more safer, right? So this is not me trying to show the protocol, but more so like I'm taking my measured risks of participating in something and hoping to get upside from it, right? So we'll see where it goes. Like it.
Have you played with any of those lending protocols, Ash?
No, so I don't really. No.
See, that's my DeFi degening.
Yeah.
Like
I never really not just DeFi stuff, or really I care more about UX, just like even from the DeFi side. Like that's why I use Solana, just peace of mind of I know I can make like no ops and not burn money, like $5, which is like a subway, or 2 subway tickets, whatever the fuck. Type of shit. It's just that. Nothing else beyond that. Like if I was really being practical and pragmatic about it, there's no reason to use Solana. It's better to be safe with your money. David, your camera's frozen, but
so I take it that you're a lot more conservative than say David is with.
I am extremely conservative. See, I'm not. I would say I guess I make stupid decisions, basically, right? With the money, I'm not necessarily conservative. I'm much more conservative with the experience of what I'm doing. Like it has to be really tight and clean. Otherwise, I get very frustrated easily.
So see, right, I was like that. The problem then became the more you try random things, obviously do it with safety. Through isolation.
The more risk you take, the more risk you take.
But also, like, there's also, we work in a world where there's random upside. Like you get randomly airdropped. Like you use ENS now. 40K. Well, go buy yourself a Prius or like a Honda, whatever, right? Or like max out a Honda Prius or whatever, like what I'm saying, Toyota Prius. Right, like it. there's like a weird double-edged sword to this problem, and so
exactly. So you do have to be experimental and try out different stuff. So when I'm excited and like things are going, I was definitely doing that with Tezos, and yeah, we should wrap up soon. Yeah, but now I don't know. Things are a little quiet. Nothing's so exciting. So I don't also have huge tokens to take out loans against too. So you know.
I mean, yeah. At the end of the day, it's like, you know, the old adage still holds very strong: is it's easy to lose money in this space. I mean, it's easy to make money, hard to keep it. In this world, right? It's always like one bad position away from your life getting reset again from the upside of being in this market. So
true. Yeah.
Right, like pretty much it's like you got ETH, you hold it tightly. You like and for me that was like, you know, I like to think, and this is something that I think my parents told me as well. It's like yeah, like you stood to benefit that you worked in DeFi. So you know exactly what it took to engineer and security risk assess. So with that in line, what's stopping you from using that judgment to apply it to your own wealth, right? And so in that way, like I don't do impermanent loss-based investing. It's just not something I want to participate in. But holy Lord, do I have a lot of things on Compound, right? Like right, and BenDAO, for example. But like, you know, when Olympus DAO did that 3,000% kind of like craze, it's like I do know some DeFi degens that looks at that and be like, oh shit, you know, like this is my time. This is my time to shine, right? Like this is my time to outwit every other fucker in the world, right?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
and you know, I'm just not that kind of person. You know, I look at 3,000% and like that number is unnatural. That number should exist only in a horror movie about DeFi. I'm gonna stay away from that. That's a stench. And
it's a good lesson. Yeah, I had a protocol that had so I was in Ohm, and Ohm had like a 8,000% APY, and there was a protocol that came out that had like a 3,000% APY, and I was thinking, well, Ohm's worked pretty good, so I'm just gonna put a little bit of money in here. And it's funny because I even posted it on Twitter of like, hey guys, doesn't this look a little funny that this is 3,000% APY? Within 24 hours, rugged. I'm like, fuck, you know, like.
Yeah, that's the world we live in, right? My parents keep on commenting whenever they like send me something random, and then like my like scam-o-meter would like trigger so fast, and it'd be like, I remember my dad would send me, he's like, is this DeFi protocol legit? And like in 2 seconds from just looking at the landing page, I was like, no, this can't be legit. This is fucking a scam. And my dad's like, how did you know? I was like, and I kind of responded like, how do you not know? It's like everything is in there, right? It's like and I kind of come to realize it's like, yeah, like being in this crypto world for so long, you build up a certain level of immunity to some of these things, but to this degree, that does not mean we should be arrogant about somebody who's willing to pull a whole
exploring,
diner, right? Like exploiting the fact that we have such an immunity, right? Like, and then you know, like the shit we've seen with opens to an extent, right? Like, I think like the thing where like they forgot to not devalidate old orders, or even the most recent thing, which is so funny, which is like, I forgot which NFT was it, but that influencer was like, hey, I'm gonna sell this NFT or whatever, and put like 100 ETH bid on it himself.
Yeah,
right?
The Bored Ape holder.
Yeah, and then I got traded, but somebody literally just traded to arb him his own bid order. It's like shit really? Like that. It's like the protocol didn't do anything wrong.
Right.
If you look at it, it's like it's dead obvious what happened, but like, you know, I don't think my immunity would have been able to prevent that. Like I would have just like checked out thinking like, no, that old bid is invalidated. You know, I'm going to trade this and this person can't settle that old bid I just had sitting around for no freaking reasons, because that's how a normal going on eBay works. You don't go on eBay and like buy a TV and throw an accidental 100K trade
Yeah.
And then 24 hours later, you see your PayPal negative 100K, right? Because you accidentally left a open offer, right? Like so
that's nuts. Yeah.
Web 3.0 kids, right? The future of finance is now, right?
Right.
Yeah.
We give you new ways to lose money that you never thought you could lose money in these ways.
DeFi 2.0 was the biggest example of that. Like, let's go buy some time. Let's go buy some fucking Wonderland, boys. Like, you know, yeah, that was awful. But well, guys, I feel like today's been a pretty chill, good conversation.
Yeah.
Should we wrap it up?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, basically 2 hours. So
yeah. Well, guys, to our listeners, I see there's a few of you there. You know, if you want to join the conversation, hit us up on Discord, discord.gg/POB. Always happy to see new faces, and you know, if there's something you feel like you have to add to the conversation, drop a comment. We'll bring it up and we can chat about it. Always got so much to share. These guys are so packed with knowledge, like when it comes to being in the space. And you guys are both little, I shouldn't say little. You guys are both unicorns in your own right, and so got lots to share. And I always appreciate hearing you guys' opinions. So with that, I guess it's been a Proof of Beauty podcast. It was a fun time, guys. I'll wrap it up.
Have a good weekend.
Have a good weekend.